They say love doesn't care about money, but life does. David Carter learned that the hard way. At 35, he was already tired in ways sleep could never fix. Raising a child alone, counting coins before payday, and praying nothing would go wrong because he couldn't afford for it to. Every night, while the city of Cleveland slept, David guarded a mansion he would never belong to. The Hawthorne estate sat like a fortress on the edge of Shaker Heights, all wrought iron gates and manicured lawns that cost more to maintain than David made in a year. That was where he noticed her. The maid who always smiled softly. The woman who ate last. The one who treated his daughter like royalty, even though she had nothing. Or so he thought. Emma looked poor, sounded poor, lived poor. She wore thrifted uniforms that didn't quite fit, took the bus while others drove beat-up Hondas, and never complained when supervisors piled extra work on her shoulders. She was invisible to the wealthy residents who passed through those gilded hallways. But David saw her, really saw her. What he didn't see was the truth. Emma wasn't struggling to survive. She was hiding. Behind that worn uniform and humble demeanor was Emily Hawthorne, sole heir to Hawthorne Global Holdings, a private investment empire worth billions. She'd walked away from penthouses in Manhattan, galas in Los Angeles, and a life where people only loved her bank account. Working as a maid wasn't desperation. It was rebellion. It was freedom. It was the first time anyone had looked at her like she mattered, not like she was money wrapped in skin. David fell for Emma because she packed extra sandwiches for his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Because she listened when he talked about his late wife. Because she laughed at his terrible jokes in the staff break room at 2 a.m. She was real in a world that felt increasingly fake. But appearances lie. When an arrogant man with power decided he wanted her, David did the unthinkable. He stood in the way. Mark Reynolds, the estate manager's son, was everything David wasn't. Wealthy, connected, cruel. When Emma rejected him, Mark turned his venom on David. Threats, intimidation, public humiliation. And when that wasn't enough, Mark orchestrated David's ultimate downfall, a false accusation that destroyed his reputation in minutes. David lost everything. His job, his dignity, his future. What David didn't know was that the woman he protected wasn't just a maid. She was a secret billionaire heiress hiding from a world that only loved her money. And the moment she chose to reveal the truth would flip every hierarchy, silence every insult, and force one broken single father to decide. Was love still real once the masks came off? This is the story of two people who met in the shadows of wealth. One who had nothing, one who had everything. And the moment when truth became more dangerous than any lie they'd ever lived. David Carter's life ended the day his wife didn't come home from the hospital. September 14th. That was the date burned into his memory. The day Lily was born. The day Sarah died. She'd been fine during the pregnancy. No complications. No warning signs. They'd laughed in the delivery room, talked about baby names, made plans for a life they'd never have. Then something went wrong during delivery. The doctors used words like hemorrhage and complications and everything we could. But David only remembered the silence afterward. The terrible, suffocating silence of a hospital room after someone stops breathing. He held Lily for the first time while Sarah's body cooled in the bed beside him. They handed him a daughter and a bill for $127,000 in the same week. That was 6 years ago. Cleveland, Ohio, didn't forgive debt. The hospital sent collections notices. His construction foreman job paid decent, but not enough to dig out from under medical bills, a mortgage, and single fatherhood. When the company downsized, David was one of the first to go. Too distracted, they said. Too many days missing work because Lily was sick or daycare fell through. He lost the house in Lakewood 3 months later. By the time Lily turned 4, they were living in a cramped apartment in Old Brooklyn, the kind of neighborhood where sirens were white noise and grocery stores had bars on the windows. David worked 2 jobs, construction during the day when he could find it, and security at night. Lily learned to sleep anywhere, in break rooms, in the back of his pickup truck, on benches outside job sites while David finished a shift. She never complained. She was too young to understand they were poor. She just knew Daddy was tired. The night security job at the Hawthorne estate came with a blessing and a curse. The blessing was steady pay, $18 an hour, overnight shifts, 5 days a week. The curse was seeing wealth up close. Walking the grounds of a mansion worth more than David would earn in 10 lifetimes. watching people who'd never worried about a light bill or a medical emergency treat luxury like air, abundant and unremarkable. The Hawthorne estate sprawled across 12 acres in Shaker Heights, where old money built walls tall enough to keep reality out. The main house looked like something from a European postcard, all stone columns and arched windows. The driveway alone was longer than David's entire apartment building. At night, when the family was away, which was most of the time, David walked the empty halls, checked locks, monitored cameras, and tried not to think about how different life could have been. He worked alone most nights. Just him, the hum of expensive silence, and the knowledge that he was protecting things he'd never own. But he wasn't completely alone. That's where Emma came in. David first noticed her during a shift change in late April. She was coming off cleaning duty, hair tied back in a simple ponytail, wearing a maid's uniform that looked 2 sizes too big. She carried herself like someone trying not to be seen. Head down, steps quiet, moving through the kitchen service entrance like a ghost. "Evening," David said, more out of habit than expectation. She looked up, startled. Her eyes were deep brown, warm but guarded. "Evening." Her voice was soft, careful, like she was used to measuring words before spending them. "You're new?" David asked. "Started 2 weeks ago." She adjusted the strap of her worn bag. "You're the night guard?" "David Carter." He extended a hand. She hesitated before shaking it. "Emma. Just Emma. No last name. No small talk." She nodded politely and left through the side door, disappearing into the Cleveland twilight. David watched her wait at the bus stop down the hill, still in her uniform, shoulders hunched against the spring wind. She didn't have a car. Probably couldn't afford one. He understood that feeling. Over the following weeks, their paths crossed more frequently. Emma worked late shifts, staying behind after the other housekeeping staff left. David started his rounds at 10 p.m., usually finding her finishing up in the kitchens or folding linens in the service rooms. They developed a rhythm, brief conversations, shared exhaustion, mutual understanding of what it meant to work in a world that barely acknowledged your existence. Emma never complained. Not about the hours, the low pay, or the way the estate manager's assistant spoke to her like she was invisible. She just worked. Quietly. Efficiently. Thoroughly. David respected that. One night in May, David brought Lily with him. Daycare had fallen through. His neighbor couldn't babysit, and he couldn't afford to miss a shift. Lily was 6 now, old enough to sit quietly with a coloring book in the guard station while David made his rounds. Emma found them in the break room around midnight. Lily was asleep on a bench, David's jacket draped over her like a blanket. "Your daughter?" Emma whispered. David nodded, checking the security monitors. "Childcare emergency. She's good, doesn't make noise." Emma looked at Lily with something David couldn't quite name. Tenderness, maybe. Or recognition. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small container. "I made extra dinner. She should eat when she wakes up." David's throat tightened. "You don't have to." "I know." Emma set the container down gently. "Pasta with vegetables. Still warm. But she should eat." That was the moment David started seeing Emma differently. Not as a coworker. Not as another employee grinding through poverty. But as someone who understood. Someone who saw Lily not as an inconvenience, but as a child who deserved kindness. Someone who gave when she had nothing to spare. David didn't know he was falling for her. Not yet. He just knew that the nights Emma worked felt a little less lonely. A little less heavy. What he didn't know was that Emma was falling too. And that nothing about her was what it seemed. Emma's real name was Emily Hawthorne. She was born into a world where money wasn't discussed because it was assumed. Where helicopters were transportation, not luxury. Where charity galas were work events and vacation meant private islands. Her father, Richard Hawthorne, had built Hawthorne Global Holdings from a modest investment firm into an empire. Real estate, tech ventures, energy portfolios, political influence. By the time Emily was 10, her last name opened doors, bought silence, and attracted predators. She learned early that people didn't see her. They saw her inheritance. Her childhood was sterile. Boarding schools in Connecticut. Summers in the Hamptons. Tutors instead of friends. Her father loved her in the abstract way wealthy men love their possessions. Proudly, distantly, conditionally. Her mother died when Emily was 12. After that, it was just her father's ambitions, and the suffocating knowledge that she wasn't a person. She was a dynasty. By 23, Emily was engaged to Preston Ashford III, a venture capitalist from Boston whose family wealth matched hers. The engagement wasn't about love. It was a merger. Their wedding was scheduled at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, guest list full of senators and CEOs. Preston was handsome, charming in public, and cruel in private. He called her the portfolio behind closed doors. He monitored her spending, criticized her appearance, and made it clear that once they married, her inheritance would be properly managed, which meant controlled by him. Emily endured it because that's what Hawthorne women did. They endured. Until the night Preston slapped her during an argument about wedding flowers. She left that night. No announcement. No confrontation. She just walked out of their penthouse in Tribeca, drove to a motel in New Jersey, and made a decision. If the world only saw her money, she'd remove it from the equation. She disappeared. Not dramatically. No fake death or international escape. She simply stopped being Emily Hawthorne. She closed her social media, changed her phone number, and used a portion of her trust fund, managed discreetly through an offshore account her father didn't monitor, to create a new identity. Emma Reeves. No connections. No history. No money. She moved to Cleveland because it was far from Manhattan, far from Los Angeles, far from anyone who'd recognize her face from society pages. She rented a studio apartment in Tremont, bought secondhand clothes, and applied for jobs that required no background checks. The Hawthorne estate hired her without irony. The estate manager, Harold Chun, barely glanced at her application. "You have cleaning experience?" "Yes," Emily lied. "Can you work nights and weekends?" "Yes." "Minimum wage, paid bi-weekly. You start Monday." And just like that, Emily Hawthorne became Emma the maid. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was cleaning her own family's property, organizing rooms she'd played in as a child, dusting furniture worth more than most people earned in a year. But nobody knew. The current residents weren't family. Her father rented the estate to foreign dignitaries and corporate executives when he wasn't using it. The staff were mostly local hires who'd never met the Hawthornes personally. Emily was invisible. And for the first time in her life, that felt like freedom. Working as a maid was harder than anything she'd done before. Her hands blistered. Her back ached. She learned the smell of industrial cleaning products, the weight of laundry carts, the particular hell of scrubbing tile grout. Other staff members treated her with casual indifference or mild contempt. The estate manager's assistant, a woman named Carol, spoke to her like she was stupid. "Emma, you missed a spot. Emma, the silver needs polishing again. Emma, why are you so slow?" Emily never argued. She apologized, redid the work, and stayed late to finish. She ate last in the staff break room, took the shifts nobody wanted, and accepted every indignity with quiet grace. Because this was the point. She needed to know what it felt like to be invisible, to be judged not by her last name, but by her labor, to understand the people who'd served her family for generations without her ever learning their names. She also needed to escape the constant calculations, the awareness that every smile might be transactional, the loneliness of never knowing if someone loved you or loved your portfolio. Here, scrubbing floors in a too-big uniform, she was just Emma. No expectations, no performances, no dynasties resting on her shoulders. It was exhausting. It was honest. It was real. That's what she was thinking the night she met David Carter. He'd greeted her like a person, not a servant, not an obstacle, just another human being working a late shift. His handshake was calloused, genuine. His eyes were tired but kind. He looked at her the way most people looked past her. Emily had been trained since childhood to read people, their motivations, their angles, their hunger. David Carter had no angle. He was just a man trying to survive. She saw it in the way he carried himself, shoulders bent with invisible weight, eyes perpetually calculating, the exhaustion of someone who couldn't afford to stop. She recognized it because she'd seen that look before. In her mother's staff, in her childhood nannies, in every person who'd served the Hawthorne family while struggling to feed their own. But she'd never been one of them. Until now. Over the following weeks, Emily learned David's story in pieces. She learned about Lily through overheard phone calls, kindergarten pickups, doctor's appointments, the constant juggling act of single fatherhood. She learned about his late wife through the way he never mentioned her directly, just the weight of her absence. She learned about his financial struggles through the way he brought the same lunch every day, peanut butter sandwich, apple, water bottle. She also learned about his character. David Carter was kind. Not performatively kind, but fundamentally decent. He held doors for cleaning staff. He learned names. He asked how people were doing and actually listened. When another security guard made a crude joke about one of the maids, David shut it down immediately. When Emily dropped a tray of cleaning supplies, David helped her pick them up without making her feel stupid. He treated her like she mattered. Emily hadn't felt that in years. The night she met Lily changed everything. The little girl was asleep in the break room, tiny under David's oversized jacket. Emily's heart clenched. She'd never wanted children, never thought she'd have the chance for a normal family. But seeing Lily there, vulnerable and trusting while her father worked to keep her fed, something shifted in Emily's chest. She'd brought extra food that night. She always did, part of her penance for a lifetime of waste. But giving it to David felt different. It felt personal. She should eat when she wakes up, Emily had said. David's expression, gratitude mixed with shame, nearly broke her. That's when Emily realized she was in trouble. She was falling for a man who thought she was poor. A man who'd never look at her the same way if he knew the truth. A man whose honesty was built on her lie. Emily lay awake that night in her Tremont studio, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with a question she'd never had to face before. Was it possible to love someone while hiding who you really were? Could something real be built on something fake? She didn't have answers, but she kept showing up to work, kept packing extra food, kept finding excuses to cross paths with David during their overlapping shifts, kept falling deeper into a relationship that couldn't possibly end well. Summer hit Cleveland like a wet blanket. By June, the Hawthorne estate shimmered with heat, the manicured lawns turned gold, and the overnight shifts became slightly more bearable with open windows and the occasional breeze off Lake Erie. David and Emma fell into an easy rhythm. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. The break room at midnight became their shared confessional, a space where exhaustion stripped away pretense and honesty felt inevitable. "Tell me something true," Emma said one night, sitting across from David at the small table. Lily was asleep nearby, curled up on a bench with her favorite stuffed rabbit. David looked up from his thermos of coffee. "That's a dangerous question." "Dangerous how?" "Makes people vulnerable." He smiled, but it was thin. "Not everyone can afford vulnerability." "Can you?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My wife died believing I'd take care of everything. I haven't. Lily deserves better than this. Better than me bringing her to work because I can't afford proper childcare. Better than secondhand clothes and food insecurity and living in a neighborhood where I worry every time she plays outside." His voice cracked. "Sarah trusted me to give our daughter a good life, and I'm failing." Emma's chest tightened. "You're not failing. I'm barely surviving." "That's not the same thing." She leaned forward. "Lily is loved, fed, safe. She smiles when she talks about you. That's not failure, David. That's everything." He looked at her like she'd offered him oxygen. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Make things feel less impossible." Emma's throat felt thick. "Maybe they're not as impossible as you think. Or maybe you're just good at making people believe that." They held eye contact for a beat too long. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, attraction, the dangerous awareness that they were tiptoeing towards something neither could afford. David looked away first. "Your turn. Tell me something true." Emily panicked. She couldn't tell him the truth, not the real truth. But she couldn't lie either, not completely. "I ran away from something," she said carefully. "From someone. I came to Cleveland because I needed to disappear." "You're not in trouble, are you?" "Not the kind you're thinking." She wrapped her hands around her water bottle. "I was engaged. To someone who didn't see me as a person. Just as something he could own." David's expression darkened. "Did he hurt you?" "Once. That was enough." "Good that you left." "Was it?" Emily's voice was small. "Sometimes I wonder if running away was brave or cowardly. If you stayed, you'd be dead or broken. There's no cowardice in survival." David's voice was fierce. "You did the right thing." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. When was the last time someone had defended her like that? When was the last time someone had been angry on her behalf? Not for her money, not for her connections, but for her, for Emma, the person she was trying to become? "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me." David's expression softened. "You're not hard to see." "But I am," Emily thought. "I'm the hardest thing to see because I'm hiding in plain sight." They started spending more time together outside of work. It started small, David bringing Lily to the park near the estate, Emma, coincidentally, walking through on her day off. Picnics that were really just shared lunches from paper bags. Conversations that stretched from afternoon into evening while Lily played on the swings. Emma learned that David had been a construction foreman before everything fell apart. That he'd loved building things, seeing raw materials transform into homes, schools, playgrounds. "I liked making things that lasted," he said one afternoon, watching Lily climb the jungle gym. "Something permanent in a world that felt temporary." "You still build things," Emma said. "You're building a life for Lily. That's permanent. It doesn't feel like enough. It's everything." Emma also learned about Sarah, not from what David said, but from what he didn't say. The way he went quiet when couples passed by. The way he never used past tense when talking about love, like letting go of his wife would be a betrayal. The way he looked at Lily sometimes, seeing her mother's face in her daughter's features. "You loved her," Emma said quietly one evening. "I did." David's voice was raw. "I still do." "Is that pathetic?" "No. It's human. Sometimes I feel guilty." "For what?" "For still being here. For laughing at jokes. For feeling anything other than grief." He swallowed hard. "For feeling things when I look at you." Emma's breath caught. "David, I know. I'm sorry. That wasn't fair." "It's fair." She touched his hand. "It's fair to feel things. It doesn't mean you loved her any less." David looked at their joined hands like they were a miracle and a mistake. "What are we doing, Emma?" "I don't know. I can't offer you anything. I'm broke, exhausted, and I come with a 6-year-old. I'm not asking for anything. You should be. You deserve someone who can." "I deserve someone who sees me," Emma interrupted. "That's you." David's eyes were glassy. "You don't know me." "Not really." "You don't know me either," Emily thought. But she said, "I know enough." They kissed that night. Not passionately, carefully, like two people afraid of breaking something fragile. It tasted like coffee and hope and terrible timing. When they pulled apart, David rested his forehead against hers. "This is a bad idea," he whispered. "Probably. I don't have anything to give you. You already gave me something." "What?" "A reason to stop running." David pulled back, searching her face. "Emma. Miss Emma." Lily came running over, gap-toothed and breathless. "Did you see how high I swung?" Emma wiped her eyes quickly, smiled. "I saw. You were amazing." Lily grabbed Emma's hand. "Will you push me?" "Of course." As Emma walked Lily back to the swings, David watched them with an expression Emily couldn't read. Later, she'd remember that look, the mixture of hope and fear. The awareness that happiness was a luxury he couldn't afford to trust. But in that moment, watching Emma push his daughter on a swing, laughing in the golden Cleveland sunlight, David let himself believe in something dangerous. He let himself believe in the future. Mark Reynolds was 28, handsome in a catalog sort of way, and utterly convinced the world owed him everything. He was the son of Harold Chin's predecessor, the former estate manager who'd left to take a position in Boston. Mark had grown up adjacent to wealth, close enough to smell it, but never close enough to own it. That proximity had poisoned him with entitlement. He drove a leased BMW, wore designer suits he couldn't quite afford, and treated service workers like props in his personal narrative. When he returned to Cleveland in July to help out his Uncle Harold with estate management, he spotted Emma immediately. She was carrying linens through the service hallway, hair pulled back, no makeup, uniform wrinkled from hours of work. To Mark, she looked like prey. "You're new," he said, blocking her path. Emma kept her eyes down. "Started in April." "What's your name?" "Emma." "Emma." He said it slowly, tasting it. "Pretty name. You from around here?" "Cleveland." "You don't look like Cleveland." Mark leaned against the wall, studying her. "You look like you should be somewhere better." Emily knew this game. She'd played it 100 times in her previous life. The wealthy man who mistakes your politeness for interest, your existence for invitation. "I need to finish this," she said, trying to move past him. Mark didn't move. "What time do you get off?" "Late. I could drive you home." "That's a long bus ride." "I'm fine, thank you." "Come on. I'm just being friendly. And I'm working." She pushed past him. Mark watched her go, his expression shifting from interested to irritated. He wasn't used to rejection, especially not from someone wearing a maid's uniform. David noticed Mark's attention during a shift change. He saw the way Mark tracked Emma's movements, the possessive way he positioned himself in doorways when she passed, the invasive questions disguised as small talk. Emma seems nice, Mark said one night, intercepting David in the security office. You two friends. David kept his tone neutral. We work together. Right? You're the night guard. David was it. Carter. Right, Carter. Mark smiled without warmth. I saw you talking to her last week. At the park. David's jaw tightened. So nothing. Just making conversation. Mark examined his nails. She's pretty. For a maid. She's a person. Of course she is. Mark's smile widened. I'm thinking of asking her out. Think she'd say yes. I think you should ask her yourself. I did. She said no. Mark's eyes hardened. But women like her. They just need the right incentive, you know? A nice dinner, some attention. They come around. Or maybe no means no. Mark's expression cooled. You protective of her, Carter? I'm protective of people being harassed at work. Harassment. Mark laughed. That's a big word for a security guard. You go to college. No. Didn't think so. Mark moved closer, invading David's space. Let me explain something about how the world works. People like me, we take what we want. People like you watch. That's your job. Watching. Making sure people like me stay safe and comfortable. So maybe you should stick to that and stay out of things that don't concern you. David's fists clenched. Emma concerns me. Does she? Mark's smile turned vicious. That's sweet. Really. The broke single dad and the poor maid. It's like a Hallmark movie. Except in real life, guys like you don't get the girl. You get second shift and child support payments. Get out of my office. It's not your office, Carter. Nothing here is yours. Not the building, not the job, not the girl. Mark straightened his suit. But I'll leave. Wouldn't want to keep you from your important work of watching cameras and pretending you matter. He left. David sat in the security office, shaking with rage and helplessness. Mark was right about one thing. David had no power here. He was disposable, replaceable. One complaint from Harold Chen's nephew and David would be unemployed again. But he couldn't let Mark hurt Emma. He found her later that night, finishing up in the kitchen. Mark Reynolds bothering you? Emma didn't look up from scrubbing the counter. Nothing I can't handle. Emma. I've dealt with men like him before. Her voice was harder than he'd ever heard it. They think women are territory to claim. They don't take no for an answer because they've never had to. If he touches you, he won't. She finally looked at David. And if he does, I'll handle it. You can't fix this. I can try. And lose your job. Emma's eyes flashed. You think I don't know what happened just now? Mark came to you. He's marking territory, David. If you fight him, you lose. That's how power works. So I just let him. You do nothing. Emma's voice cracked. Please. I can't watch you lose everything because of me. Emma. Promise me. She grabbed his hands. Promise me you'll stay out of it. David wanted a promise. Wanted to make her feel safe. But the words stuck in his throat because he knew he was lying. He couldn't stay out of it. Not when it came to her. August brought tension that had nothing to do with Cleveland's humidity. Mark's pursuit of Emma escalated from annoying to menacing. He started timing his visits to coincide with her shifts, cornering her in supply closets, making inappropriate comments disguised as compliments. When Emma continued rejecting him, Mark's ego curdled into something darker. You think you're too good for me? He asked one afternoon, trapping her in the laundry room. A maid with nothing thinks she's too good for me? I think I'm not interested, Emma said evenly. That's all. Because of Carter? The security guard. Mark laughed. You'd rather fuck a broke single dad than go out with me? I'd rather be alone than be with someone who talks like that. Mark's face flushed. You're making a mistake. I'll survive. Will you? Mark stepped closer. You know how easy it is to get someone like you fired? One word to my uncle. One complaint about theft, about attitude, about anything. You think Harold will believe you or me? Emma held his gaze. Try it. I will. Mark's voice was venomous. And when you're unemployed and desperate, we'll see how interested you are then. He left. Emma stood in the laundry room, hands shaking, fighting the urge to reveal who she really was. One phone call. That's all it would take. One call to her father's lawyers and Mark Reynolds would be destroyed, fired, blacklisted, possibly sued into oblivion. But that would end everything. The anonymity, the freedom, the relationship with David that was the first honest thing she'd had in years. She couldn't do it. Not yet. David noticed Emma's stress. She was quieter, more withdrawn. She jumped at unexpected noises. She started declining his invitations to the park, making excuses about being busy or tired. Talk to me, David said one night. after Lily had fallen asleep in the break room. Nothing to talk about. Emma. I'm fine, David. You're not fine. You're scared. Is it Mark? Her silence was answer enough. David's jaw clenched. What did he do? He's just being persistent. What did he do, Emma? He threatened to get me fired. David stood abruptly, chair scraping. I'll kill him. David, no. He can't threaten you. I won't let him. You can't stop him. Emma grabbed David's arm. You have no power here. If you confront him, you'll lose your job too. Then what? How do you feed Lily? How do you pay rent? So I just let him harass you? You protect yourself. Please. Emma's eyes were glassy. I can't be the reason you and Lily lose everything. You're not the reason. He is. It's the same result. David pulled her close. Emma buried her face in his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. Coffee and exhaustion and something fundamentally safe. This was the problem with loving someone, she realized. It made you vulnerable. It gave you something to lose. I love you, David whispered. I know I shouldn't. I know it's too fast, too complicated, too everything. But I love you. Emily's heart cracked open. Nobody had ever loved her. Not Emma the maid. Not the invented version of herself. They'd loved Emily Hawthorne, the portfolio in a cocktail dress. But David loved Emma, the woman who took the bus, who packed her own lunch, who existed without wealth as a buffer. I love you too, she whispered back. And she meant it. But she was also lying. Because David loved a version of her that didn't exist. A version without trust funds and lawyers, and the power to destroy Mark Reynolds with a single phone call. What would he think when he learned the truth? Would he still love her? Or would he feel betrayed, manipulated, humiliated? Emily didn't know, and she was terrified to find out. We'll figure this out, David said. Together. Together, Emma echoed. But even as she said it, she knew the clock was ticking. Mark wouldn't stop. The pressure would build until something broke. And when it did, everyone's secrets would come spilling out. The question was, who would survive the impact? The answer came faster than either of them expected. It happened on a Thursday night in late August. David was doing his rounds when he heard shouting from the East Wing. He ran toward the noise, radio in hand, already knowing something was wrong. He found Mark in the staff storage room, standing over Emma, her wrist in his grip. Let her go, David said, voice deadly calm. Mark's eyes were wild. This is none of your business, Carter. I said let her go. Mark released Emma's wrist, leaving red marks. She was stealing. I caught her red-handed. That's a lie, Emma said, rubbing her wrist. Is it? Mark pulled a silver cigarette case from his pocket. Expensive, monogrammed, unmistakably from the Hawthorne collection. Found this in your bag. Emma's face went white. I didn't. Save it. Mark turned to David. You witnessed this. I'm calling the police. David looked at Emma. She was shaking her head, eyes pleading. Then he looked at Mark, at his smug expression, his triumphant posture. This was a setup. David knew it in his bones. Mark had planted evidence to get Emma fired, possibly arrested, definitely ruined. She didn't steal it, David said. You're accusing me of lying? Yes. Mark's smile was reptilian. Careful, Carter. That sounds like insubordination. I don't care what it sounds like. Emma didn't steal anything. You weren't here. You didn't see. I did see. David stepped forward. I saw you plant that case in her bag earlier today. It was a lie. David hadn't seen anything. But he watched Mark's expression flicker. Uncertainty, calculation. If David claimed to have witnessed the planting, Mark's story would unravel. It would be his word against David's. And while Mark had connections, he didn't have proof. You're lying, Mark said, but his voice wavered. Am I? Want to test that in front of Harold Chin? Want to explain why you were alone in the storage room with Emma's bag? Mark's face flushed. I could have you arrested for filing a false report. Do it. But Emma walks out of here clean. Silence stretched between them, electric with hatred. Finally, Mark pocketed the cigarette case. Fine. She's lucky this time. But you, he pointed at David, you just committed career suicide. Probably. I'm calling my uncle right now. You're done, Carter. Get in line. Mark stormed out. Emma grabbed David's arm. What did you just do? The right thing. You lied for me. You'll lose your job. I know. David, I couldn't let him destroy you. David cupped her face. I couldn't. Emma felt something break inside her. This man, this beautiful, self-destructive man, had just thrown away his livelihood to protect a lie. To protect her. And he didn't even know who she really was. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Don't be sorry. Be safe. But Emma wasn't sorry about being protected. She was sorry about the truth she'd hidden. Sorry that David's nobility was based on a false premise. Sorry that when reality came crashing down, his sacrifice would feel like humiliation. Harold Chun arrived 30 minutes later. The conversation was brief and brutal. Mark had already called, had already spun the story. David Carter had falsely accused Harold's nephew of planting evidence to cover for a maid he was romantically involved with. David's credibility was zero. His judgment was compromised. His employment was terminated effective immediately. "You're a good man," Harold said, almost apologetic. "But you put me in an impossible position." "I understand," David said. "Do you need time to collect your things?" "No. I'm ready." David found Emma waiting outside the estate's gates. Lily was asleep in the back of his truck, unaware her father's life had just imploded. "Again. I'm so sorry," Emma said, tears streaming. "Not your fault." "It is. If you just what? Let him hurt you? Let him win." David shook his head. "I don't regret this." "You should." "I don't." He kissed her forehead. "I'll find another job. It'll be fine." But they both knew he was lying. Security jobs didn't grow on trees, especially for someone fired under suspicious circumstances. David was back where he'd started, unemployed, broke, desperate. Except this time, he had something worse: public humiliation. Within days, word spread through Cleveland's service industry. David Carter, the security guard who'd been fired for lying to protect a woman. No one wanted to hire someone who couldn't be trusted, who'd let personal feelings compromise professional judgment. His savings, what little existed, evaporated within 2 weeks. Emma tried to help. She offered money, connections, anything. David refused. His pride was the last thing he had left. He wouldn't take charity from the woman whose honor had cost him everything. But Emma wasn't asking. She was planning. She'd spent weeks trying to protect her anonymity, trying to make the relationship work without revealing the truth. But watching David spiral, watching him sell possessions, skip meals, carry Lily through a world that was falling apart, Emily realized the truth. Love wasn't enough. Sometimes love required sacrifice. Sometimes it required revelation. Sometimes you had to tear off the mask and face the consequences. She made the call. The invitation arrived at David's apartment 3 days later. It was embossed, formal, expensive. The Hawthorne Foundation Annual Gala, October 12th, Plaza Hotel, New York City. Black tie required. +1 welcome. David almost threw it away. This had to be a joke, some cruel prank at his expense. But the invitation looked real. When he called the number at the bottom, a woman's voice confirmed. Yes, Mr. Carter was on the guest list. Yes, transportation and accommodations would be provided. No, she couldn't explain why. "Emma," David said when she answered his call. "Did you do this?" "Do what?" "I got invited to some billionaire fundraiser in New York. The Hawthorne Foundation Gala." Silence on the other end. "Emma, you should go," she said quietly. "Why would I?" "Trust me. You should go. I don't even have a suit. There'll be one waiting at your hotel." "Emma, what's going on?" "You'll understand soon. Please, David. Just trust me." David wanted to argue. But Emma's voice held something he couldn't identify: desperation, fear, hope. Against his better judgment, he agreed. 2 weeks later, David stood in a hotel room at the plaza, wearing a suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. A car had picked him up from his apartment in Cleveland, driven him to a private airfield, and flown him to New York on a jet that had actual leather seats and a flight attendant who offered champagne. Lily had stayed with David's neighbor, Mrs. Chun, bribed with enough cash to cover a month's worth of her insistence that she didn't need payment. Everything about this felt wrong. David was a security guard, former security guard. He didn't belong at galas. He didn't belong in private jets. He didn't belong anywhere near the Plaza Hotel. But Emma had asked, and David trusted her, even when it made no sense. The ballroom was obscene. Chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls. Tables decorated with centerpieces worth more than David's truck. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns that probably required teams to construct. This was wealth David had only glimpsed through windows, guarding estates while real life happened inside. He felt like an imposter. Worse, he felt like entertainment. Like someone had invited him here to humiliate him, to show him exactly how far outside his world he really was. Then the lights dimmed. A woman walked onto the stage. Not Emma. Not the Emma David knew. This woman wore a floor-length emerald gown that caught light like water. Her hair was styled in waves that framed her face. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears. She moved with practiced grace, comfortable in her skin, comfortable in this world. But her eyes were Emma's. "Good evening," she said, voice carrying across the ballroom. "Thank you for joining the Hawthorne Foundation's annual gala." David's heart stopped. "My name is Emily Hawthorne." She paused, scanning the crowd. Chairwoman of Hawthorne Global Holdings and president of the Hawthorne Foundation. "Tonight, we're here to discuss the foundation's work in poverty alleviation, workers' rights, and economic justice." David couldn't breathe. Around him, people applauded politely, unaware that his entire world was disintegrating. Emily Hawthorne, chairwoman, billionaire heiress. The woman he'd loved, the woman he'd protected, the woman he'd thought was struggling to survive. She'd been pretending. The whole time. Emma kept talking, but David couldn't hear her. Blood roared in his ears. This couldn't be real. It was too absurd, too cruel. The woman he'd sacrificed everything for was a billionaire. The woman he'd tried to protect from poverty had more wealth than David could comprehend. She'd lied. About everything. He stood abruptly, chair scraping. People turned to look. David didn't care. He pushed through the crowd, desperate for air, desperate for anything that made sense. He made it to the hallway before someone caught his arm. "Mr. Carter." A man in a sharp suit. Security, probably. "Miss Hawthorne would like to speak with you." "I'm leaving." "Please." She asked specifically. I don't care what she asked. "David." He turned. Emily, stood in the hallway, still in her gown, face pale, eyes desperate. "Don't," David said. "Don't say my name like that. Please let me explain." "Explain what? That you lied? That you played dress-up while I lost my job protecting you? That everything was a lie?" "Not everything." "Which part was real, Emma? Or is it Emily? I don't even know who you are." "I'm the same person." "You're not." David's voice cracked. "The person I knew was poor. Struggling. Real. You're." He gestured at her gown, her jewelry, the opulent hallway. "You're this. And this is about as far from real as it gets. I had to hide. You don't understand." "You're right. I don't understand. Because I'm just a broke security guard who was stupid enough to believe someone like you could care about someone like me. I do care. I love you. You love the idea of me. The charity case. The noble poor person you could save." David's laugh was bitter. "How generous of you. That's not fair." "Fair." David stepped closer, eyes burning. "You want to talk about fair? I lost my job for you. My reputation. My ability to provide for my daughter. I did that thinking I was protecting someone who needed it. But you didn't need protection. You needed entertainment." "David, please. Was any of it real? The food you packed? The conversations?" His voice broke. "The way you looked at me. All of it was real. How can I believe that? How can I believe anything you say?" Emily's tears were falling now, mascara tracking down her face. "Because I gave up everything to be Emma. I walked away from my inheritance, my family, my entire life, because I wanted to know what it felt like to be seen for who I am, not what I have. You saw me. You loved me when you thought I was nobody. But you weren't nobody. You were lying. I was surviving. At my expense." Emily flinched. I know, and I'm sorry. But David, you have to understand. I've spent my entire life having people love my money, my name, my usefulness. You were the first person who loved me. Just me. I loved Emma," David said quietly. "I don't know who Emily is. I'm the same person. You're not." Emma took the bus. Emma struggled. Emma understood what it meant to have nothing. "Emily." He shook his head. "Emily lives in a world I'll never belong to. A world where poverty is a costume you can take off whenever it stops being fun. It was never fun. But you could stop. That's the difference. When I can't pay rent, I'm homeless. When you can't pay rent, you call your accountant." David stepped back. "I need to go." "David, wait." "For what? Another lie? Another performance?" "For the truth. I don't think you know what that is." He walked away. Emily watched him go, her heart shattering with every step. Behind her, the gala continued, champagne flowing, orchestra playing, wealthy people celebrating their own generosity while the man she loved disappeared into the New York City night. She'd wanted him to see the truth. She just hadn't expected it to destroy everything. David didn't return to Cleveland immediately. He couldn't face Lily, Couldn't explain why Daddy looked like someone had died. Instead, he wandered Manhattan for hours, ending up in Central Park at dawn, sitting on a bench while the city woke around him. Everything he'd believed was a lie. Not just about Emma, about himself. He'd thought he was noble, sacrificing his job to protect someone weaker. But Emily Hawthorne wasn't weak. She was one of the most powerful people in the country, which meant David's sacrifice was meaningless. Worse than meaningless, it was embarrassing. A joke. The poor single dad who'd lost everything protecting a secret billionaire. How many people knew? How many of Emily's wealthy friends had laughed about it? The security guard who thought he was a hero? David felt humiliated in ways he couldn't articulate. His phone buzzed. Another call from Emily. He'd stopped answering after the 15th attempt. What was there to say? Sorry for lying to you for months? Sorry for letting you destroy your life based on false pretenses? Sorry for making you feel things that weren't real? But they were real, a voice whispered. Your feelings were real. That made it worse. David's phone buzzed again. This time, a text. Please come to the plaza. Room 2047. I won't ask again. He should ignore it. Should fly back to Cleveland, hug Lily, and forget Emily Hawthorne existed. But David had never been good at protecting himself. So he went. The hotel room was obscene, larger than David's apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Emily stood by the window, no longer in her gala gown. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, hair pulled back, makeup gone. She looked like Emma again, except she wasn't. Thank you for coming, Emily said quietly. You said you'd explain. I will. But first, I need you to understand something. She turned to face him. My father is Richard Hawthorne. My mother died when I was 12. I grew up in boarding schools, summer homes, and galas like the one last night. I was engaged to a man who valued my inheritance more than my humanity. He hit me once. I left. David's expression didn't change. I moved to Cleveland because I needed to disappear, to understand what it meant to be invisible, to know if anyone would care about me without the money attached. Emily's voice cracked. You did. You cared when you thought I had nothing. You protected me when you thought I was vulnerable. You sacrificed for me when you believed I needed it. Based on a lie. Based on the truth of who I was in that moment. Emily stepped closer. Emma was real. She wasn't a performance. She was me trying to understand myself without the wealth. And what I learned was that I'd rather be Emma, broke, exhausted, invisible, if it meant being loved by you. You don't get to choose, David said harshly. You're Emily Hawthorne. That's reality. Emma was make-believe. Then why did you love her? Because I thought she needed me. I didn't need you. Emily's eyes were fierce. Not your money. I have that. Not your connections. I have those too. I needed someone who saw me as human. Someone who fought for me because I mattered, not because of what I could offer. That was you, David. I can't trust you. I know. You lied for months. I did. How do I know you're not lying now? Emily pulled something from her pocket, a folded document. She handed it to David. He opened it carefully. It was a legal contract, dense with terminology David barely understood. But certain phrases stood out. Transfer of assets, dissolution of trust, irrevocable gift. What is this? David asked. I'm giving away my inheritance. All of it. Emily's voice was steady. To the foundation, to charities, to workers' rights organizations. Everything except enough to live modestly. David's hands shook. You can't. I can. I'm choosing to. Emily met his eyes. Because you were right. Money insulated me from reality. It made me a coward. I hid behind wealth instead of facing the consequences of my choices. But I'm done hiding. Emily, I love you, David. I love Lily. I love the life we could build together. Not with private jets and penthouses, but with honesty and struggle and real connection. If you'll have me. If you can ever trust me again. David stared at the document, then at Emily. This woman had just offered to give up billions for him. It was insane. Romantic and insane. He should tell her to keep her money. To stop being ridiculous. To, why, he whispered. Because wealth without love is just expensive loneliness. Emily smiled sadly. I spent 30 years learning that lesson. I'm done being lonely. David closed his eyes. Could he trust her? Could he forgive her? Could he build a life with someone who'd lied so completely? Maybe not. But maybe that was the wrong question. The right question was, did he want to? And despite everything, despite the anger and hurt and humiliation, he did. He wanted Emma. He wanted Emily. He wanted the complicated, infuriating, beautiful woman standing in front of him, offering her entire world as penance. "I can't promise I'll forgive you quickly," David said. "I don't expect you to. I can't promise this'll be easy. Nothing worth having is. And I can't," his voice broke. "I can't be with someone I don't trust. Then I'll earn it back, however long it takes." David opened his eyes. "Keep your money. David, keep it. Use it for good. But don't give it away for me." "That's not," he swallowed hard. "That's not what I need." "What do you need?" "Honesty. Time. And for you to be whoever you actually are. Not Emma pretending to be poor. Not Emily pretending to be normal. Just you. Whoever that is." Emily's laugh was watery. "I'm still figuring that out." "Then we'll figure it out together." "Together?" "I'm still furious at you." "I know. And hurt." "I know. And it'll take time." "I have time," Emily said. "I have all the time in the world." David stepped forward and kissed her. It wasn't the careful kiss from the park. It was angry, desperate, real. When they pulled apart, both were crying. "I love you," David whispered. "I hate that I love you, but I do. I love you too. I'm sorry I made you doubt that. Show me. Not with money. With truth. I will. I promise." Outside, Manhattan was waking up. Millions of people starting their days, chasing dreams, surviving. Somewhere in Cleveland, Lily was probably eating breakfast, asking Mrs. Chun when Daddy would come home. Somewhere in this city, Mark Reynolds was probably celebrating his victory over the security guard who dared challenge him. But in this moment, in this absurdly expensive hotel room, two broken people chose each other. Again, despite everything. Because love, real love, wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. 3 months later, David Carter stood in front of the Hawthorne estate in Cleveland, Ohio. But this time, he wasn't wearing a security guard uniform. He wore a contractor's gear, boots, tool belt, work gloves. Behind him, a crew of men and women prepared to start demolition on the East Wing. The estate was being converted into a community center and affordable housing complex, funded by the Hawthorne Foundation. Emily Hawthorne herself had overseen the project, working with local organizations to ensure Cleveland's residents had housing, job training, and resources. And David was the foreman. Not because of charity, not because of pity, but because he was good at his job, because he understood construction, and because Emily had learned something important. Helping people meant giving them opportunity, not handouts. "You ready?" Emily asked, walking up beside him. She wore jeans, boots, and a work shirt, practical clothes for a day of overseeing construction. No diamonds, no couture, just Emily, learning to exist somewhere between the wealth she'd inherited and the poverty she'd briefly known. "Always wanted to tear this place down," David said, smiling. "Metaphorically or literally?" "Both." They'd spent the past 3 months rebuilding trust. It wasn't easy. David had moments where anger flared, when he remembered the deception, when he felt like a fool. Emily had moments of defensiveness, when she wanted to explain, to justify, to make David understand. But they worked through it. Therapy helped. Honesty helped more. Lily helped most of all. When David had finally explained everything to his daughter, that Emma was actually Emily, that she had a lot of money, that things were complicated, Lily had simply shrugged and said, "Does she still make good sandwiches?" "Yeah," David had said, stunned by 6-year-old wisdom. "Then I like her." Children understood what adults forgot. Love wasn't about circumstances. It was about connection. Mark Reynolds had been a different story. After Emily revealed her identity, she'd used her considerable influence to investigate his behavior. Turned out, Mark had a history of harassment at previous jobs, complaints buried by family connections, and NDAs. Emily made sure every complaint resurfaced. Mark was fired, blacklisted from estate management, and currently facing multiple lawsuits. His uncle Harold had apologized profusely to David, offering his job back. David had declined. He was done guarding other people's property. He wanted to build his own things again. The community center project was perfect. David oversaw construction while Emily worked with nonprofits to design programming. They argued frequently. Emily thought David was too conservative with budgets. David thought Emily was too idealistic. But they were building something real together. Something that mattered. "I have something for you," Emily said, pulling a small box from her pocket. David raised an eyebrow. "If that's another designer watch." "It's not." She opened the box. Inside was a simple silver band. I know we're not ready for that conversation yet, but this is a promise that I'll keep choosing honesty, that I'll keep choosing you, that I'll keep working to deserve your trust. David took the ring, turning it over in his fingers. Engraved inside was a single word, together. Emily, you don't have to wear it. I just wanted you to know. David slipped the ring on. It fit perfectly. Together, he said. Emily's smile was brighter than any diamond. Together. They kissed, surrounded by construction equipment and the ruins of a mansion that represented everything wrong with wealth. But from those ruins, something new was growing. Something community-owned, community-run, community-loved. That evening, David picked up Lily from school. She ran to him, backpack flying, shouting about art class and a new friend named Marcus. Emily waited by David's truck, the same beat-up vehicle he'd driven as a security guard. She'd offered to buy him something new. He'd refused. The truck had history. Miss Emily. Lily launched herself at Emily, who caught her with a laugh. How was school? Good. We learned about symmetry. That means both sides are the same. That's right. Are you coming for dinner? Emily looked at David. 3 months ago, that question would have been complicated. Now it was simple. If your dad says yes. He always says yes, Lily stage whispered. He loves you. Emily's eyes glistened. I love him too. And me? Especially you. They drove back to David's apartment in Old Brooklyn, still cramped, still shabby, still everything Cleveland's poverty looked like. Emily had offered a better place. David had refused. Not out of pride, but out of practicality. They were rebuilding. That meant starting from where they actually were, not where wealth could take them. Emily was learning to live simply. It was harder than she'd expected. She missed convenient luxuries, missed the ease that money provided. But she didn't miss the isolation. Didn't miss being valued for her inheritance instead of her character. She was happier broke and honest than she'd ever been wealthy and lonely. Over spaghetti that Lily helped make, badly, the three of them talked about their days. David described the foundation work. Emily shared updates from the nonprofit partners. Lily explained symmetry using meatballs. It was ordinary. Beautifully, perfectly ordinary. After Lily went to bed, David and Emily sat on the small balcony, watching Cleveland's skyline. The city lights reflected off Lake Erie, turning the water silver. Do you regret it? David asked quietly. Giving up that life? Emily thought carefully. I regret how I handled it. I regret lying to you. But giving up the money? The lifestyle? She shook her head. No, that wasn't living. It was existing in a gilded cage. And this? David gestured at the cramped apartment, the peeling paint, the distant sound of sirens. This is living? With you and Lily? Yes. Emily took his hand. This is living. David kissed her forehead. I still don't trust you completely. I know. And I'm still angry sometimes. I know that too. But I love you. The real you. Whoever that is. I'm still figuring it out, Emily admitted. But I think she's someone who works hard, loves fiercely, and doesn't hide anymore. She sounds pretty great. She's a work in progress. Aren't we all? They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city they both called home. David Carter, the broke single dad who'd lost everything. Emily Hawthorne, the billionaire heiress who'd given up everything. Two people who'd found each other in the spaces between wealth and poverty, honesty and deception, masks and truth. Love didn't erase the past. It didn't make struggles disappear or heal wounds instantly. But it gave them a reason to keep trying, to keep choosing each other, day after difficult day. In the apartment below, someone played music too loudly. Across the street, a couple argued in Spanish. A dog barked. Life continued, messy, real, unglamorous. And for the first time in both of their lives, that felt like enough. Because love without masks meant accepting the beautiful, broken reality of being human. It meant choosing connection over comfort, truth over convenience, each other over everything. David looked at Emily, no longer hiding, no longer pretending, just present, and felt something settle in his chest. Not trust, not yet, but hope. Hope that they'd figure it out. That Lily would grow up seeing love as partnership, not performance. That the community center would help other families survive what David had survived. That Emily would learn to live authentically, without the armor of wealth or the costume of poverty. Hope that together, they could build something real. And sometimes, hope was enough to start. What are you thinking? Emily asked. David smiled. That I'm glad you were a terrible maid. I was not, she paused. Okay, I was pretty bad. The worst. But you loved me anyway. I did. I do. David pulled her close. Even when I shouldn't. Especially when you shouldn't. They laughed, and the sound carried across the Cleveland night, mixing with sirens and music and life. Two people who'd lost themselves in lies had found each other in truth. It wasn't the fairy tale either had imagined. It was better, because it was real. And real, they'd learned, was the only thing worth having. The end.